My ex laughed at my business idea and left me for a doctor. Now I own the clinic where he works, and they still don't know. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, people have laughed at my dreams. Growing up, ambition wasn't something my family encouraged. It was almost treated like a flaw. My dad worked a stable government job for 30 years, and my mom used to say, security is success. So, when I told them I wanted to build something of my own, something that could actually help people, they smiled politely but changed the subject. I got used to that look people give you when they think you're naive but don't want to say it outright. Julia, my ex, was different, or at least I thought she was. When we met, she seemed drawn to my passion, the way I talked about creating a tech platform that connected doctors with patients directly, cutting out corporate middlemen. She used to say it was cute how passionate I was. But somewhere along the way, cute turned into pathetic. I remember one night vividly. I was hunched over my laptop in our small apartment, debugging lines of code for hours. The glow from the screen was the only light in the room. Julia sat on the couch behind me, scrolling through her phone, laughing at Instagram stories of her friends on vacation. She sighed. "You really think this startup thing is going to take off? Maybe you should focus on getting a real job." I didn't look up. "I'm building something real, Jules. It just takes time," she scoffed. "Time? Or are you just scared to admit it's not working?" That one cut deep. I stayed silent, listening to the hum of the fridge and the faint tapping of her nails against the screen. I kept working, convincing myself her doubt didn't matter. But it did. Every word she said started echoing in my head late at night. She wanted luxury, security, and I had potential. And potential doesn't pay bills. The more I dreamed, the more frustrated she became. And I could feel it. Our story was shifting from love to silent resentment. And deep down, I knew something was about to break. Julia's frustration didn't fade. It festered. Every week turned into a new comparison, a new reminder of how far I was from the man she wanted me to be. Her coworkers were getting promotions, buying cars, traveling to Bali, and she made sure I knew it. "Andrew just bought a Tesla," she'd say casually while sipping her morning coffee. "He's younger than you know?" She didn't need to say the rest. I was supposed to feel small. I tried to stay calm, telling myself success takes time. But it's hard to stay focused when the person you love keeps measuring your worth in dollar signs. I'd spend hours coding in silence while she FaceTimed her friends in the next room, laughing about how her boyfriend's startup was still just an idea. One night, after another argument about money, she finally snapped, "Do you even hear yourself, Ethan?" She shouted, her voice shaking. "You're 29 and still chasing some fantasy app. You're not Steve Jobs, you're just stuck." I stared at her. The woman I once thought would stand beside me through anything. "I thought you believed in me," I said quietly. She crossed her arms. "I believed in you when I thought you'd become something. But this isn't a life. This is delusion." Her words echoed long after she stormed out of the room. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the clutter of my so-called dream, empty coffee cups, code notes, invoices I couldn't pay. The air felt thick, heavy with everything left unsaid. The next morning, she was gone. No dramatic goodbye, no closure. Just a text. "I need someone with direction." I'm sorry, that was it. Years of love, erased in one message. For the first time, I looked at my reflection in the dark laptop screen and whispered, "Maybe she's right." But something inside me refused to die with that thought. It was small, buried under pain, but it was still there, and I didn't know it yet. But her leaving was the spark that would change everything. The first few weeks after Julia left were a blur of silence. The apartment felt too big, too quiet, like it was mocking me. Her perfume still lingered on the couch cushions, her laughter still echoed in the corners of my mind. I kept replaying her words, delusion, fantasy, stuck, until they became part of my thoughts. Days melted together. I stopped shaving, stopped answering calls, even stopped coding. I told myself I was just taking a break, but really, I was falling apart. Then, one night, while doom-scrolling on my old laptop, An ad popped up. Apply for the National Health Innovation Grant. Funding for small health tech startups. It felt like a cruel joke at first. The deadline was 3 days away, and my prototype was unfinished. But something in me stirred. Maybe it was pride, maybe spite. Maybe I just wanted to prove Julia wrong. I whispered to myself, "You either try now or you give up forever." For 72 hours, I barely slept. I lived on black coffee and leftover noodles, typing until my fingers cramped. The walls around me seemed to fade. The only thing real was the code on the screen and the heartbeat in my ears. When I finally hit submit, my hands were shaking. I didn't even know if it would send properly. 2 weeks later, an email notification appeared. "Congratulations. Your proposal has been selected for funding consideration." I just stared at the screen. For a long time, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then the dam broke. I laughed, I cried, I felt alive again. It wasn't success yet, but it was something real, something mine. That night, I opened the same window Julia used to mock me for keeping open. Lines of messy, stubborn code. And for the first time, I whispered not to her voice in my head, but to myself, "This is where my life starts again." But I had no idea how high or how dark the climb would get from here. When the grant finally came through, I remember holding the approval letter like it was sacred. The amount wasn't huge, but to me, it felt like freedom printed on paper. I rented a tiny co-working space downtown. Bare walls, flickering lights, and a single desk I built myself. I named my company MediConnect. For the first time, it wasn't just a dream, it was real. The first few months were brutal. I worked 14-hour days, surviving on coffee and vending machine snacks. The system glitched constantly, and half the time I felt like I was drowning in my own ambition. Still, I refused to stop. Whenever doubt crept in, I'd picture Julia laughing at me, telling her friends that I'd never make it. That memory burned hot enough to keep me going. Then, one evening, everything shifted. A small community clinic reached out after finding my website. The owner said, "We've been struggling to manage appointments. Your platform looks perfect." My hands were trembling when I set up their account. It wasn't glamorous, it was a humble clinic on the edge of town. But it was my first yes. When their feedback came in weeks later, I read it over and over. This software saved us. For the first time in years, I felt something close to pride, pure, unfiltered pride. I celebrated alone with cheap takeout and an old bottle of beer. I didn't have anyone to share it with, but that was fine. The silence that once felt heavy now felt earned. Late that night, I scrolled through Instagram and saw Julia again, posing in Italy with Andrew, the doctor she left me for. Her caption read, "When you choose stability, life rewards you." I closed the app. I didn't need to comment, didn't need revenge. Not yet. Because I knew deep down, my story wasn't over. It was just starting to get interesting. By the time MediConnect started turning a profit, I barely recognized myself. The guy who once coded from a dim apartment now had a real team. 2 developers, a marketing intern, and a tiny office that actually smelled like fresh paint instead of desperation. I worked harder than ever, but it didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like purpose. Articles began circulating. Local tech blogs calling MediConnect a promising disruptor in healthcare. My parents, who once told me to find something stable, now bragged about me to their friends. For the first time, people didn't just tolerate my dream, they respected it. But even as my world started to expand, some part of me still looked back. I'd catch myself checking Julia's profile late at night, even though I knew it was poison. She looked happy. Perfect makeup, fancy dinners, that smug glow of someone who thought they'd won. In one post, she wrote about how proud she was of her husband, Dr. Andrew, for changing lives at his new private clinic. My stomach twisted when I saw the name, Evergreen Medical Clinic. It sounded familiar. A few weeks later, at a networking event, a former classmate approached me. "Ethan, heard about your company, man. Congrats." Then, grinning, he added, "You know, Julia's husband works at that Evergreen clinic, right?" Small world. I laughed politely, but my mind froze. I hadn't thought about where Andrew worked, or cared to, but suddenly it mattered. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the past and present blurring together. Julia had mocked the very dream that was now changing my life, and married a man who depended on the same industry I was revolutionizing. It felt like fate was writing something poetic, something bigger than me, and I had no idea that the punchline was already being written behind the scenes. The growth came faster than I could process. Within a year, MediConnect wasn't just a startup. It was a brand. Investors who once ignored my emails were suddenly asking for meetings. Clinics were signing up in clusters, and for the first time, I could afford to breathe. But success has a funny way of finding old ghosts. During a strategy session, my business consultant, Priya, slid a folder across the table. "These are potential acquisitions," she said. "Smaller clinics struggling financially but with loyal patient bases. We could buy them out, rebrand, and integrate them directly into MediConnect's network." I scanned the list absently until one name made my chest tighten. Evergreen Medical Clinic. I stared at it for a long moment. Priya noticed my silence. "They're a great target," she continued. "High-quality staff, poor management, lots of debt. Their lead physician is a guy named Dr. Andrew Wells." It was like the universe paused to smirk at me. Andrew. Julia's Andrew. I forced myself to act casual. Yeah, could be interesting," I said, hiding the adrenaline rushing through me. Priya smiled, not realizing she just handed me poetic symmetry wrapped in a business proposal. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone left, the city lights bleeding through the glass. The idea of owning the place where he worked, the clinic she bragged about, was intoxicating. But more than revenge, it felt like destiny knocking politely. Still, I didn't let emotion drive me. I studied the financials, crafted the deal carefully, and ensured every negotiation went through my corporate lawyer. No one knew my personal connection. To them, it was just business. When the final documents were drafted, I signed without hesitation. With one pen stroke, Evergreen Medical Clinic became a property of MediConnect Holdings. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a laugh I didn't know I'd been holding in. Julia once said I'd never own anything real. Now, I owned the clinic where her husband worked, and they had no idea. The acquisition closed quietly, no press release, no announcement. Just a silent transfer of ownership through paperwork and digital signatures. I made sure my name stayed buried deep in the corporate structure. To the world, Evergreen Medical Clinic was now operated by MediConnect Holdings, but no one knew who sat at the top. I visited the clinic for the first time a few weeks later. I told myself it was just a routine site inspection, but my pulse betrayed me. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh paint, the kind of sterile calm you find in medical spaces. The waiting room was full. Families, tired nurses, a crying toddler, and behind the glass window, I saw him, Dr. Andrew Wells. Clean-cut, confident, the kind of guy who radiated charm even when he wasn't trying. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was just another face in a suit, pretending to be a silent investor. Watching him joke with the receptionist, I felt nothing like what I expected. No rage, no bitterness. Just a strange, detached satisfaction. "Mr. Grant," the clinic manager said, breaking my trance, "we're so grateful for the acquisition. You've saved this place," I smiled politely. "We believe in helping clinics reach their potential," I replied, choosing every word carefully. Andrew walked past me moments later, shaking hands with the manager. "Who's the new partner?" he asked casually. "Just one of the holding group representatives," the manager said. Andrew smiled at me, oblivious. "Well, whoever you are, thanks for keeping us afloat. You've got no idea how much this place means to us." I almost laughed at the irony. If only you knew. As I stepped outside, a cold breeze hit my face and I realized I didn't need to say a word. The universe had already done the talking for me. I had become a ghost in their story, one that owned everything they stood on. A few months after the acquisition, MediConnect was invited to a prestigious medical innovation conference. I was scheduled to deliver the keynote speech. My first time standing on a stage not as a dreamer, but as the man who made it. I rehearsed my lines 100 times, determined to keep the focus on technology and progress, not on the ghost still living rent-free in my past. The auditorium buzzed with chatter, the smell of espresso and freshly printed brochures filling the air. When I stepped up to the podium, the applause hit like a wave. I looked out at the sea of professionals, doctors, investors, and froze. In the third row, I saw Julia. She was exactly as I remembered, poised, beautiful, and dangerously composed. Sitting beside her was Andrew, his hand resting casually on her leg. For a split second, I almost stumbled over my words. But then something in me settled. I straightened my jacket, smiled, and kept going. After the speech, people gathered around me, shaking hands and exchanging cards. That's when I heard her voice behind me. "Ethan," I turned. She looked stunned, maybe even a little nervous. "Wow, I didn't realize it was you up there," she said, her smile unsure. "Yeah," I said lightly. "Been a busy few years," she laughed awkwardly. "You've really made something of yourself, huh? Andrew works at Evergreen Medical Clinic now. You probably know it. We've been through a lot, but he's doing great there." My heartbeat quickened, but I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "That's good to hear. Evergreen's in good hands." She didn't catch the double meaning, but I saw her eyes flicker with curiosity. "You should stop by sometime," she said. "Andrew loves meeting new innovators." I nodded slowly. "Maybe I will." As she walked away, her perfume lingered in the air, familiar, haunting, meaningless now. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing closure. I was writing it. That night, after the conference, I didn't celebrate. I went home, poured a glass of whiskey, and sat in the dark with my old laptop open, the same one I'd coded on during those sleepless nights when Julia used to laugh behind me. Seeing her again had stirred something unexpected, not anger, but memory. Sharp, unfiltered memory. I remembered the night she left, the apartment door slamming, the echo swallowing the last piece of warmth I had. I remembered the rent notices piling up, the text from my landlord threatening eviction, the way my stomach twisted because I couldn't even afford groceries. There was one night I sat on the floor surrounded by bills, holding my head in my hands, whispering, "Maybe I really am a joke." I hadn't eaten in a full day, and when I tried to sleep, I couldn't stop hearing her voice. "You'll never be more than a broke dreamer." I remember punching the wall, just once, hard enough to leave a dent, and staring at my bleeding knuckles like proof that pain was at least real. That was my rock bottom, the place where I almost quit everything. Back then, no one saw me. No one cared if I failed or disappeared. The only thing that kept me alive was spite. Pure, cold determination to prove that her laughter wouldn't be the last sound attached to my name. Now, sitting in that same silence years later, with success, power, everything I once begged for, I realized something. I wasn't angry at Julia anymore. I was angry at the version of me who ever needed her approval. I closed the laptop slowly, tracing the scratches on its surface, the scars of the man who refused to die when everyone else had buried him. And as I looked at the city lights outside my window, I made a promise. The next time I walked into that clinic, it wouldn't be as the boy she left behind. It would be as the man who owned her world. 2 weeks later, I decided it was time. MediConnect was conducting an official tour of all newly acquired clinics, and Evergreen was next on the list. I wore a navy suit, not flashy, just sharp enough to make an impression. My assistant handed me the schedule, completely unaware that this stop meant something personal. To her, it was business. To me, it was the end of a chapter I'd been writing in blood and code. When I walked through the clinic doors, nostalgia hit like static. Bright lights, sterile air, the faint hum of equipment. I spotted Julia before she saw me. She was standing behind the reception desk, sorting files, her hair tied back just like it used to be when she worked late nights in our apartment. She looked up, and for a brief second her face froze. "Ethan," she whispered, as if saying my name might make the floor shift beneath her. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "Good to see you, Julia." Andrew emerged from his office, cheerful and oblivious. "Oh, you two know each other?" he asked, grinning as he extended his hand. I'm Andrew Wells, head physician here. You must be from MediConnect Holdings. You've done an amazing job saving this place. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you, doctor. We're proud of this clinic. It's an important part of our portfolio. Julia's lips parted slightly, confusion and dread flickering in her eyes. She looked between us, searching for a hint that this was a dream. Wait, you're not just... The clinic manager interrupted, smiling proudly. Mr. Grant here isn't just from MediConnect. He's the founder, the man who owns everything you see. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Andrew turned to me, stunned. You're the Ethan Grant, the CEO? I nodded once. That's right, Julia's face drained of color. I met her eyes for half a heartbeat, long enough for her to understand everything without me saying a single word. Revenge didn't need fire. Sometimes it only needed silence and ownership. After that day, everything shifted. I didn't gloat, didn't send messages, didn't even acknowledge what had happened. But Julia knew. You could see it in the way she avoided my gaze every time I visited for quarterly reviews, her once confident smile now replaced with a nervous half-grin. She never brought up our past, but her silence spoke louder than any apology could. Andrew, meanwhile, remained oblivious. Every meeting, he shook my hand with that same firm enthusiasm. You've given us stability, Ethan, he said once, patting my shoulder. My wife and I owe a lot to MediConnect. I simply smiled and replied, just doing my job. It was poetic in ways I couldn't have written better myself. The man she'd left me for worked tirelessly under my company banner, unknowingly feeding the empire she'd mocked me for dreaming of. Their stability, the very thing she chased, existed because of me. And the irony, she still didn't dare to tell him. One afternoon, I stopped by for an unannounced visit. Julia was at the front desk, typing. The ring on her finger glinted under the fluorescent light. She looked up, startled, and muttered, Mr. Grant, like it hurt to say. I just nodded politely. No malice, no emotion, just quiet power. Walking through the halls, I overheard Andrew praising MediConnect during a staff meeting. This partnership saved us, he said. Whoever runs that company knows what real innovation looks like. I paused outside the room, listening to their applause, and for a moment, I felt complete. This wasn't about humiliating Julia anymore. It was about balance, the universe setting things right in its own way. I left the clinic without a word, the door closing behind me with a soft click. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet sound of success echoing through the place where you were once doubted. Months passed, and Evergreen thrived under MediConnect. I stopped visiting after a while. There was nothing left to prove. The revenge, if that's even what it was, had already served its purpose. Julia and Andrew went on with their lives, unaware of how close they lived to the truth. Sometimes I'd drive by the clinic at night, watching the glow of the lobby lights through the glass. Nurses came and went, patients smiled, and my company's logo gleamed proudly on the sign outside. That was enough. One evening, I pulled over across the street and sat there for a long time, thinking about the road that brought me here. The loneliness, the doubt, the nights I'd spent convincing myself that my dreams were worth something. I thought about Julia's laughter, her words, "You'll never be more than a broke dreamer." For years, those words haunted me. Now they were just noise, background static in a story that no longer defined me. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need her to know the truth. The power wasn't in her recognition. It was in my peace. The boy who once begged for her approval had evolved into a man who didn't need anyone's. The following week, I signed a new deal. MediConnect was expanding overseas. My company was now valued in the millions, and yet, as I sat in that same old chair in my office, I realized the true victory wasn't the money or the power. It was that I'd learned to believe in myself when no one else did. I stood by the window, watching the city pulse below, and whispered to myself, "They still don't know." Then I smiled, and maybe they never need to, because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the people who doubted you. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and walking away in silence.